Let's start with why the clearly impossible is trivially easy, and go from there. Today, the nightmare of facing and invading Russia without American support or a Ukrainian bulwark looms over all of Europe. Lacking vast US firepower, conventional wisdom tells us it will be incredibly difficult for European allies to replace American gear on the front lines of Ukraine. But what if it were laughably easy to send overwhelming military resources to their front line over the next couple of months, for little more than the cost of shipping and handling, and without drawing down, in this instance, European arsenals? There are over 1 billion people in NATO, and only a third of them are American. Some EU members aren't in the alliance but support Ukraine, and Europe has a few other close friends around the world. What if European and allied governments said to their people, Ukraine is in a desperate war for survival. If you have a drone, please give it to us to donate to them immediately. When national governments are addressing over 700 million citizens, if they only supply one drone for every 100 people, that's over 7 million drones. After a few weeks of this, governments can say to their populations, if you have a drone you have not yet donated, we are willing to pay for used drones to donate to Ukraine to use on the battlefield. The donated drones cost you only shipping and handling. Ukraine is more than capable of adding explosives or having drones pick them up and drop them. The used drones cost slightly more, but are still cheaper than buying them new. Imagine the consequences of flooding Ukraine with 7 million or more drones over the next couple of months, for almost no money. So let's start by thinking outside the box. Because if we stay in the kill box, we're going to die there. Speaking of which, the new US administration has called upon every NATO ally to spend at least 5% of their GDP on defense, indicating there's a risk of an invasion by Russia, an invasion they would like to deter or defeat. Former Prime Minister Mario Draghi, by contrast, has issued the Draghi Report on why European competitiveness has been declining compared to the rest of the world and America. His biggest recommendation is that Europe spend a few percent of her GDP on competitiveness. So I'm asking, what if the extra expenditures on defense and those on competitiveness are largely the same money? I asked this question of OpenAI's deep research, shown below, and my question, of course, touched on some of the ways legitimate national security spending could be leveraged to achieve economic and technological advancement. Obviously, such expenditures could be leveraged to create economic and technological benefits for their countries. But the point is not just to get us thinking, but reminding us we can ask further, better questions if we choose to pursue a strategy, or simply to explore it. I'm not going to read you the full answer, which is quite extensive, but I will share with you a bit of the question, which was, how could NATO countries meet the US administration's demand they increase defense spending to 5% of GDP in a way which dramatically improves their economic prospects? And then I asked it to consider vital dual-use technologies deemed critical for both security and near-term economic competitiveness. So, if you're interested in biosecurity, curing diseases, and radically improving biotech and medical science is the foundation of biosecurity. You can develop human enhancement to improve the abilities of troops, intelligence, and counterintelligence agents, but also the scientists, programmers, inventors, and engineers who contribute to the country's scientific and technological progress. Developing national frontier AI models, the leading edge, most powerful AI models, or extensive AI inference and energy infrastructure to retain long-term military, intelligence, scientific, technological, and economic competitiveness, that obviously has enormous benefits in terms of your science, technology, and economy. Increasingly automating cybersecurity via AI, mass production of military systems like drones, and so on and so forth, developing AI targeting for systems like Blue Halo's Locust laser weapon for targeting incoming drones, missiles, and other ordnance, developing AI systems to shoot down incoming missiles, drones, and aircraft in a conventional attack, or even more critically, in a nuclear war, and to consider upgrading existing systems with better AI, computation, weapons, and sensors, as well as securely networking these systems together across a country and across cooperating, trustworthy allies to produce a system of systems benefiting from their combined sensor capacity and processing power. Developing AI piloting for drones or planes like F-16s, developing quantum computing, including quantum encryption and decryption, or quantum sensors for qualitative or quantitative edge, developing robotic infantry troops, developing 6th and 7th generation fighters, upgrading existing weapons and equipment to be effective in the modern AI era, such as improved sensors, AI targeting, and full autonomy for systems or vehicles like planes, helicopters, IFVs, rocket and cannon artillery, and tanks. And finally, assessing what weapons are obsolete already or are about to be, which can also not be upgraded effectively, and which should simply be donated to someone like Ukraine and then replaced with a more advanced system, possibly something completely different from the equipment or ammunition being donated. For example, towed artillery no longer seemed practical given counter-battery fire at FPV drones on the battlefield. Apparently, our Marine Corps simply donated their towed artillery to Ukraine because they decided they needed to upgrade and Ukraine could still use it. Also consider the immediacy of the threat from Russia to the country in question, especially if NATO countries believe an attack to be relatively imminent, if not deterred. For example, Poland, Finland, and the Baltic states face a much more immediate risk of invasion, while nations such as Spain, Portugal, Iceland, Canada, and the United States may consider a direct attack much less likely. They may prioritize investments accordingly. Consider the impact of cognitive warfare, including via evolutionary algorithms and psychological warfare, and how countries might invest in countering its effects. So yes, that's a huge set of things, but part of what I really wanted to do here is to get a little bit outside of just the most common ideas and concerns. And of course, not everything I've just referenced here is completely exotic. NATO has been referring to a great deal of it that you might think is kind of surprising, like human enhancement. That's been showing up in NATO reports for several years now, maybe a decade, certainly for the last 2 U.S. administrations. Now, deep research clarified what I was looking for and then generated this enormous report. But there are things that I didn't even bring up that are worth considering. For example, if you're trying to build up a massive AI infrastructure in general, that has enormous defense implications. But if you're mobilizing defense, you may also mobilize things like federal lands or nationally held lands, like in the US it would be federal land, to build huge centers which might be hard to zone otherwise. In other words, a military base might be exactly the sort of place where you can do this enormous infrastructure, where having, say, massive energy infrastructure and computational infrastructure and well secured all on site might be trivially easy, whereas setting it in the middle of most of your major cities might be much, much harder. There are just so many things like that to consider. And so I'm linking directly to the report in ChatGPT and also where I have it on my Substack so you can see the whole thing. And again, it's not just this report. It's that if you are in any way touching on this particular set of policies in any way, you can be asking better questions from your own perspective, informed by your own particular knowledge, your particular point of view, and your particular needs and concerns. And that's really the core of this. It's not just the answers I found here, it's the better questions and better answers that you can get for yourself.